Right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bill Maroney. I'm CEO of United States Equestrian Federation, and joining me today for this webinar is David O'Connor, Chief of Sport, Britt McCormick, USHJ President and USEF Board Member, Sonia Keating, General Counsel and Chief Operating Officer, Stephen Schumacher, who is head of our veterinary area, including drugs and medication, and Natalie Voss, who joined us as our communications chief. She is going to help facilitate the meeting today. If you have any questions, you can submit them through the Q&A area on the bottom of your screen. And after each slide, we'll take a little bit of time to answer any questions related to that particular topic. Each person will cover a topic today, and we look forward to hearing back from you. And again, thanks for joining. All right, Natalie, over to you to start us off.
So the first area that we're going to touch off on is regarding horse welfare is the reporting process. So Sonia is going to walk us through that.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for being here. We're glad that we could do this virtually so that we can have so many attendees. So we're happy that you have taken the time to join us this afternoon. I'm just going to quickly do a high-level overview of the reporting process for any unethical treatment of the horse or horse abuse complaints. Those can be reported in a variety of ways. We encourage you to use the online reporting system on the USEF website. When the report comes in, we have an intake procedure where somebody on a regulations team is evaluating the complaint for jurisdictional purposes to make sure we've got jurisdiction over the matter. So they're looking at when something occurred, where it occurred, the horse involved, and the person who's engaged in the misconduct. It then would move on to the investigation stage. That stage can take, it can take anywhere from 30 days to 120 days, depending on the volume of complaints we have, depending on the number of witnesses, and how complicated the matter is or how complicated it is to gather all the evidence. Following the investigation stage, it's reviewed internally and a recommendation is made whether to pursue formal disciplinary action or try to resolve the matter informally, which is by agreement of the parties. I know we got some questions that came in advance of the webinar, I think particularly about the D&M cases and how long it takes from the time that a substance is detected in the sample at the laboratory until a matter is fully resolved. And most of those are done within about 60 days. It averages maybe about 20 business days for the results from the laboratory to come to the Federation. There's some internal processing that's done, and then the respondent is notified about the adverse analytical finding or the positive. We give a period of time for the person to provide a response and also request testing of the B sample. When this B sample is tested traditionally, that took up to maybe 4 months. We send it out to a different laboratory. We have engaged a newer laboratory that can turn those around quicker, or they've at least told us that they'll be able to turn those around in about 10 to 12 business days. So we anticipate that timeline is going to be shortened. That can often, delay the case, and following those results coming back, then there's either an offer made for the respondent to accept, or if they want to go forward to a hearing, then it goes through that formal disciplinary process. So going through that latter process does take longer. There's a panel from the disciplinary committee that is appointed to hear and adjudicate that matter. And you've got a lot of schedules that have to be coordinated to get that on the calendar. Natalie, I'll just answer one more quick question and then I'll stop. In terms of what makes a good report, for the unethical treatment of the horse, as much detail as you can provide when you make a report is helpful. And any type of documentary evidence that you have, whether it's a video or it is images, as well as any fact witnesses, any people that you are aware of that might have actually witnessed the misconduct take place, providing a list of those individuals as well as their contact information, really kind of helps get that process initiated faster. So I'm going to stop now. I know we've got a lot to cover today, and I think open it up for any additional questions before we move on to the next topic.
So we did have one of the questions that came in advance of today's presentation is someone, and I won't mention that. Usually I'm going to mention the first name of who asked the question. I won't in this situation because what they're asking is if you are a whistleblower about a horse welfare issue, how can you maintain your anonymity? And there's a second part to this question, but I'll let you start with that.
So I would suggest using our anonymous texting platform. That is, you can text the number 2 and then USEF. That is managed by a third party vendor. We do not know who is sending it, but we can engage with you. So when you text us that, we do not know your identity, but we can engage. We can ask you questions. We can ask for more information. You can text in videos. You can text in photographs, all the kind of details and information that we're looking for, and you would maintain anonymity throughout that process. I will say that those reports can be very, very difficult to investigate, particularly if there are no fact witnesses, because we do need people that are able to authenticate any videos or images, and that would ultimately be willing to testify before the hearing committee if it gets that far. But that is the safest route to maintain the anonymity is through reporting it through the texting platform.
Great. And the same person wanted to know how they should go about reporting welfare concerns that take place at a horse show where they've brought something to a steward or a technical delegate and the official is kind of inclined to let things slide or maybe doesn't agree with the person that there is a problem here. Should they use that same platform or how should they talk to us about that?
Sure. Thanks, Natalie. That's a good question. So if you're not getting the response that you want from the officials, then feel free to report it directly to USEF. And you can do it through the texting platform, or you can do it online through the unethical treatment of the horse electronic report form.
Since you mentioned the reporting process and the timeline process for drugs and medications cases, which are a different kind of case from horse welfare cases, that prompted somebody to ask, why is the cost of B sample testing so expensive? They note oftentimes the fine for a minor drug violation might be comparable to the expense of having a B sample tested. And I know that it's a very different process. So maybe you can shed a little bit of light on that.
Sure. Well, those rates are harder to negotiate because they're not done in volume, like our other drug testing of the A samples where they're getting in quantities and they're kind of taking those. They know what to expect in terms of volume. This is the best rate that we can negotiate with the laboratories. It's consistent with the other equine anti-doping agencies, but it is a third-party laboratory, and they're pretty consistent between those other labs in terms of what they charge for the B sample. When they receive the B sample, they are looking for a particular. They're going in to confirm the presence of a particular substance, which is kind of the second phase of what they're doing with the A sample. But that's the market rate, and that is a pass through. So USEF is charging the trainer what the laboratory is charging. There's no additional costs associated with that USEF keeps.
Great. That's all I have on this subject area, but keep those questions coming. And in the meantime, we'll move on to Bill to tell us more about the licensed official's role.
Thanks, Nedley. So the topic of licensed officials has been talked about for quite a while, and it's very clear that as an organization, USEF needs to make sure that we have the resources in place to support our officials. and that our membership as well as our officials know their roles and responsibilities of the licensed officials as well as the scope of their authority. So we are undertaking a process to redefine the roles and responsibilities. It'll be starting with USEF as to what is an organization we feel are needed from our officials on the grounds at horse shows to ensure first and foremost the safety and welfare of horse and human, and and then the rules and regulations of the sport. Once we get an outline for that, we'll be socializing it out to stakeholder groups to gain more input back as we refine those roles and responsibilities. Additionally, we're looking at the educational resources and supporting resources such as the Guide to Collecting Evidence, et cetera, to make sure they are relevant with the environment, meet the needs of the officials, provide them the support they need to be able to do their jobs to the best of their ability and in accordance with the roles and responsibilities. We want to make sure that the membership also knows all of that and has access to it as well, so they too can learn what the role of an official is at a competition, and it just makes for a better understanding of what everybody is tasked with doing and how the system functions. One of the things that was done earlier this year was to add the recorded warning system to our overall system of warnings that can be given at a competition. And many officials have been asking for something that is between just giving a verbal warning and going straight to a yellow card. And the eventing discipline had a recorded warning system in place for the last few years, and it's worked very well for that particular discipline, and we chose to adopt it across the board. And it is already being utilized extremely well and seems to have provided the much asked for and needed intermediary step from verbal to warning card. And that seems to be working out really well. So, Natalie, I'm happy to take any questions anyone has.
Yes, we did have somebody ask with regard to the redefining roles and responsibilities,
Mhm.
who or what types of stakeholders will be the ones who are sort of providing feedback on that?
So members, which includes competitors, organizers, and officials themselves.
Great. I think that's all I have as far as questions specific to licensed officials.
Great.
Somebody's asking about in the process of generating feedback from members and competitors as part of the stakeholder group, is that something that's going to go out via email to members? How will they know how to get their feedback
Yep.
in? And what will the comment period be like for something like that?
Once we have an outline in place, we will distribute a communication to the membership and give them an email box that they can provide their feedback on the outline of roles and responsibilities. And we're probably talking about a 30-day period of feedback to come back to us.
Great. Next up, we have David presenting the USEF horse welfare guidelines that we just rolled out earlier this fall.
All right, gotta find my unmute button. Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining us. So this is a project that we've been kind of working on all year, and it is an informational guidelines, right? And that's what it was designed for. It is about dividing it up into groups. What are we all looking for? And we used a visual image of a stoplight of green, of the things that we enjoy watching. No matter what the discipline, doesn't make any difference at all. No matter what the discipline that it's in or the games that you play, that the green is something that you enjoy watching. We all enjoy watching. And then in the stoplight idea that the yellow would be something that is starting to make you uncomfortable, could be very short term though. It resolves itself, and there could possibly be some interaction with an official at that point. And then we also have this red section where really that action need to be stopped. Somebody's having an emotional time or a problem to the place where the action needs to be stopped, and that's where an official needs to step in. And if you're watching it from the outside, that would be the place to always go in that show environment, would be to go to an official first. And then if it were, again, just like the other systems, it was felt like the resolution wasn't to your liking, and you still felt very strongly about it, going to the USEF direct through the reporting process or the text to USEF would be a place also that you could go to have something investigated. So it's an idea of the boundaries of our sport in some ways, and they're guidelines. They are based on the rules that we have available, so there's not rule changes that have come with it. It is literally the guidelines information that for an official's point of view, from an athlete's point of view, from a trainer's point of view, these are all trying to have a thought process about what we're all looking for. And we have spent probably 6 months kind of socializing around with officials and trainers and athletes and the board of the USEF, and everybody had quite a long time to put some influence into this document. It is a document that is now up on the website, and also with corresponding videos as explanations along with the same idea. So it is all trying to get information out for everybody and have the joint conversations between us all of the things that we thoroughly celebrate and enjoy, and the things that we really don't want to see, and we don't want to put it out into the public situation, and having some type of conversation and guidelines about that. So it does, it's been well documented now, and it's been, I think, well received. The more that we get it out, the more these conversations happen, the more that we believe that we can all support these type of ideas. So please go onto the website and look at the document. And also the videos on the learning centers are also up there now. So please take a look at those and forward comments to us with directly to the USEF. We're always this is a joint program, I think, in between us all in many ways, about trying to make sure that what we are putting out in front of everybody, to ourselves and also to the public, is something that we can all celebrate. So Natalie, I don't know if there's any questions coming along here.
Yes, so we do have one who is asking, given that welfare issues are usually urgent and need to be addressed pretty quickly, what is the time frame and the process somebody should go through in the moment to get something documented and make sure that it's on the record?
Sure, the first step would be go directly to the officials involved on the day, right? So that would be the steward or a schooling supervisor that is out there right now. That would be the first place that you would go. And then if you felt strongly about it, even farther, then the option of going directly to the USEF is completely there. As you know, with the same guidelines that Sonia talked about earlier, and that same level of thought process and documentation that would need to go along with that. But on the ground right then, it's going to be the official in charge of that area would be the first person to go to.
We have somebody bringing up something that we have heard before at town halls, which is that they feel that stewards maybe don't feel comfortable to confront some of these issues. And, how can we be sure that they are documenting things when they get brought to them? And I know this is something that we're thinking about sort of more broadly with licensed officials generally, right, David?
Yeah, I think that if you actually listen to what Bill was just going about, and also what we're doing here, right? So number one would be socialize and get us these conversations going back and forth into a larger audience. The second thing is about putting these type of conversations in front of the officials, and having them come to a place where they feel confident about having a conversation, because a lot of the times the conversation, a very mild-mannered conversation, is the thing that actually stops the process. It stops the cycle. And what we're really talking about is using a phrase about taking a break, instead of that it feeling like it jumps straight into the regulatory process. If it is egregious enough or the reaction back and forth is egregious enough, certainly could step into the regulatory process, but that wouldn't be the primary aim. The primary aid would be just a consultative idea. So why don't you take a break? Because it looks like that's going off in the same direction. That is mainly what we want to try to encourage right from the beginning, straight across the board.
And in that type of situation, this is a really good question. Is the steward or judge compelled to file a report about that situation even after they've approached the person in question?
Yes, and that's part of that recorded warning system that we've had, that we put another system in here. If it's just a verbal first conversation and resolves itself, it's not necessarily would it have to go into the recorded warning system, but the recorded warning system is basically so people know later on, in other parts throughout the year that something's go on. And that will always be the judgment call. Just like in every one of these situations, it's still going to be a judgment call coming down to the official. That's what we hire them for. We ask them to judge, whether somebody's going to get a 7 or a 6, or this horse is above this horse, and that's above this horse in the placings. That type of judgment call is always going to be a part of no matter what system that we come up with. So there is a judgment call that is going to have to be always part of the system. We just want to make sure that the stewards and the officials, they have the confidence to be able to make that call and then make a place where they can have a conversation with somebody, not always feeling like it's a disciplinary action right from the beginning.
We have someone asking, and this might be a question that either David or Sonia could pick up on. Does USEF ever bring law enforcement into a complaint? I'm imagining what they mean is if we get a welfare complaint sent directly to us, and it seems like it could be of interest to law enforcement, what is that interaction like?
Yes.
Yes.
Go ahead, David.
No, go ahead, Sonia, because we've talked about it all year. If it's to that level, certainly local and county or state law enforcement, if it's to that level, would be contacted and brought in.
Yeah, typically we don't see that with respect to
Right.
complaints at the horse shows, but often we're getting complaints about, horses that are malnourished or neglected at their home facilities. And we do encourage people to call the authorities in those situations, and we do assist with reporting those to the local agencies or enforcement teams.
Yeah, and I would have to say that in the investigation that we've done in the last couple of years of with welfare issues, right, left, and center, that's where we felt like this within the officials' education system and these guidelines was a little bit of a weak area, and that's why we've come up and tried to have a document and have a thought process and videos that we can start these conversations so that people are seeing the same things and being on the same page.
Great. We've also got a question from someone who points out, in the field, it's possible that stewards will be told by the rider, like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. I know what I'm doing. Can you sort of walk us through the education that's available to professionals who are our members about these issues?
Yeah, well, that's exactly why we've started to create these type of documents, because we want to make sure that everybody is really, what are we looking for? What are we looking at? Are we celebrating what we're looking at? Are we starting to make it uncomfortable or something that needs to be stopped? And that conversation, the more that everybody sees this and talks about it and realizes where some of those lines are, where those guidelines, those boundaries are, then those conversations are going to be more productive instead of being from having animosity to them. And that's really what we're looking for. If it does go to that level, then, it could escalate. And if somebody gets into an escalating type of frame, then that is going to be something that could step into that regulatory process of, a recorded warning or yellow card or further action by the USEF.
We have a follow-up question to that. Is there any kind of licensing for professionals in the works at any point?
That's that's a very big conversation that actually we've been going around this for a long time. And I know that there is a lot of desire and thought process about certifying some type of trainers, that's been a conversation that's been coming around. We have really started to look at is the mandatory side of it, a voluntary side of it. That is something that I would say us as a national federation are really trying to wrap our heads around it about what the boundary of those scopes are. Because if you make everybody certified, then how do you regulate it on the ground? How do you know that person is? And this, I mean, these are all true conversations and really good conversations, because it has been a desire to look at this from a long way away, and it becomes a very, very difficult thing to adjudicate if we want to draw something up. So I'm sorry that that's a roundabout answer, but it is a conversation that I think everybody across the whole sport has really been having. Should we have some mandatory type of education that trainers can hear? Maybe that's part of a membership, maybe that's a card, or maybe that's identifying who these people are would be some steps.
Great. And the last one I have for this session here, for this part of the session is we had somebody ask how we're supporting affiliates in bringing horse welfare goals to life at the grassroots level.
Well, I think this is a conversation we've had straight across the board with everybody. And so I do think the affiliates, I know we have gone around, Bill and I and Sonia, and lots of others have gone around to affiliates and affiliate meetings of having not only these type of town halls, but conversations, with board members, with general membership about the direction of where horse welfare has taken us, rightfully so. And I think we're really kind of, and Brett would be interesting to talk to about here. I think we've been hand in hand with the affiliates right along this line of making sure that the horses are first, in this idea that welfare has got to be a priority for all of us.
Great, thank you. Next up, we have Dr. Schumacher to talk about our drugs and medications program, and specifically supplements. Now, I know you guys might have a lot of drugs and medications questions. If you don't mind to sort of drop those into the Q&A sooner than later, that would be great, because Dr. Schumacher is on a bit of a time crunch, and I want to make sure that he's here to answer them. So go ahead, Dr. Schumacher, take it away.
All right, thank you, Natalie. Just wanted to talk a little bit about supplements. In 2025, we had a vet summit earlier this year in March down in Ocala, Florida, where we brought a number of veterinarians together. And one of the issues was raised were the abundance of supplements out there on the market, whether or not they were being veterinary prescribed, or I shouldn't say prescribed because they are not pharmaceutical substances, but suggested or recommended. And really what the question is how are these deficiencies being determined? Why do these horses need these supplementations with some of the feed that we have nowadays? It's pretty scientifically developed, researched, and they're much more balanced than they used to be. So the whole idea is behind, why do we use supplements in horses? Typically, the question is, do they contain prohibited substances? And the end of the day, the answer is we don't know. We can only review ingredient lists. We do not, make a blanket statement about specific supplements, supplement companies, or specific designated brand names, if you will. It is a simple question, but it's not a very simple answer. Typically, supplements are not regulated by the FDA. They're not reviewed. FDA may be involved in the manufacturing process, but it's only about what they're doing at the manufacturing facility. They're not reviewing these statements for the diagnosis, the treatment, or to cure an injury or illness. The FDA does not review that, and that's not just equine supplements; it's human supplements as well. In the human world, there are many comments out there. There are many recommendations not to rely solely on the ingredient list. I know they did a study a number of years ago, and probably 15, 16 years ago, where they found, almost 20% of supplements for humans that were intended for increasing muscle mass actually contained anabolic steroids, but they were not listed on the list of ingredients. We've had over the years, we've had a number of positive findings that were associated with supplementation for the horse, and the actual pharmaceutical agent that was detected was not on the list of the ingredients. So it's very difficult to review them. We review them actually when we have the call or the email. And the reason being is supplement companies can also change the list of ingredients without notice. And so we never will make a comment based on a specific product. We only refer to the specific ingredients that they have listed on their website. And in the end, it comes back to, does the horse really need this? Does this horse really need this to function and the like? So with that, I can take any supplement questions.
So we had somebody ask before the session got going about the addition of medications or supplement ingredients to the banned list, and can they be added at any time during the show year or only go into effect at the start of the next show season? How does that process work regarding that list?
Yeah, we don't have a prescribed list, and the reason being is a lot of these supplements or prohibited substances could be as a result of frankly a search, or they're added into a supplement based on their efficacy or their use in human medicine or for other species. And so it constantly, we have to evaluate as they are according to General Rule 410 1A, whether or not they violate the rule itself. So it is challenging. We are talking about putting out a more prescriptive list to provide to people. But really, I think the one thing that hasn't been discussed here is the horse welfare as far as these supplements go. It's important about the efficacy or actually if they have a physiological effect, but why are we subjecting horses to them if we don't really know? One of the issues that we also deal with supplement companies is we try and get information based on their science. Have they put this into horses? Have they detected pharmacodynamic effects? But also, have they put it into horses and made sure it was safe? So I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, sort of dovetailing with that, Stephen, you mentioned that there might be at some point a defined prescriptive list. We have somebody asking, like, is there a plan to put together a web page where people could type in the name of an ingredient or a drug and have it pop up for them all the information that they need regarding rules, permissibility status, all that sort of thing?
Yes, that we are working on that. We're also looking at potentially providing an app. Some of the problems that we also deal with is the fact that the active ingredient may be in a plant, an herb, and so besides looking for the active ingredient, we also would have to provide the plant name that may be used in the supplement versus the active ingredient. So, but we are looking at that to try and make it easier for people to understand.
That sort of is a good jumping off point for another question that somebody had, which was, when it comes to supplements, why are there herbs and sort of plant ingredients and more natural sounding ingredients that are making their way onto the list that is a list of examples of prohibited substances? This person specifically noted L-theanine, which I know is something we've been communicating about recently.
Yeah, so just because it's natural, holistic, organic doesn't mean it does not have an effect. A lot of those substances can be amino acids that are non-essential. In other words, the horse does not need to have them, or they produce them on their own. They don't have to get them from their diet. In excess, some of those amino acids can cause problems. GABA is a great example. Gamma aminobutyric acid is an amino acid that all mammalian species have, and it's an inhibitory neurotransmitter. When you give excess of it, is it really good for the horse? We don't think so. As well as, you know, the effects that it could produce in the horse. So, you know, just because it's natural, holistic, organic doesn't mean it doesn't have some drawbacks. And so we look at it as, do they affect these different body systems? One of them is the central nervous system. And so in that light, we will categorize something that is prohibited that may be from plants.
We have a few people asking about specific either products or medication that addresses different types of issues like coughing or EPM or different types of common conditions. I know that we can't offer advice in a broad sort of setting like this because the individual situation may vary, but what can you sort of tell people when they do have a question about, is my protocol okay, or is this product okay? You know, what would you like them to know?
Yeah, that's a very good point. We do not provide veterinary advice. People call up all the time and saying, hey, can I give this to my horse? It's a pharmaceutical drug. And our answer is, you know, we defer to the veterinarian. What we're there to do is inform them or educate them of how that horse can get back into competition if it's a prohibited substance. The amount of time they need to stay off the medication, the filing of a medication report form. But at the end of the day, you know, if people want to withhold medication when it's, you know, in the best interest of the horse, we're never going to recommend that. You know, we want people to treat their horses appropriately, and then we'll allow them or inform them of how to get back into competition.
Great. We have one more question here from somebody who asks a question that I think raises an important point. Isn't mislabeling a product, I think speaking of a supplement, isn't that the company's responsibility? You know, the FDA doesn't let people do that. Can you sort of speak to why that's not something that is in action with supplements?
I think the best example of that was in the 2024 Olympic Games. There was actually a calming supplement that was used on a Belgian horse that ended up having trazodone in it. And so while that was an international supplement, that was not something that I think that was generated from the US, it highlights that point that, yes, you know, because the FDA in this country they do not review those lists of ingredients, or they don't, I should say they don't have control over the list of ingredients. And they also do not confirm whether or not that list of ingredients is comprehensive. In other words, if there's something added to it or not. As I've mentioned before, we've had positives over the years where the supplement actually contained a prohibited substance, but it was not on the ingredient list. There's no way that we can control that. But as far as the FDA, they don't do it either. If we have something that's problematic or expansive of cases, then yes, we can contact the FDA.
Great. That's all I have at the moment with regard to drugs and medications questions. I did want to let everybody know that we are planning to do a member webinar specifically devoted to drugs and medications, which I know will focus quite a bit on supplements, but does not only have to be about supplements. That will be November 3rd at 4 p.m. So if you guys have additional questions about that, be sure to tune in for that one. You'll get an email asking you about registration, if you would like to register the same way that you did for this one. So with that, let's go ahead and move on to the next topic. We have a number of proposed rule changes that are out for comment right now, but there was one in particular that we wanted to talk through and get everybody's feedback on. I think Sonia, I think this one's you.
Oh, yes. So there is actually all of the proposed rule changes to the general rules that came in by the September 1st deadline are posted on the website. So we would encourage you all to take a look at those, and there you can provide comments directly on that page. You certainly can send those in by email as well if that's more convenient. One of the rules that will be going through the consultation process, and I think that's what's important at the outset, is we'll get member feedback. These rules will go to all of our sport committees for feedback. They'll go to the affiliate conventions for debate there. There'll be an open forum at the USEF annual meeting in January. And then finally will make its way to the board in June of 26. So we really, really encourage to hear from you all and provide your perspectives on these, because that's how the board will make an informed decision on whether or not to adopt the proposals. In this particular proposal, it does propose that there would be a 60-day provisional suspension for the trainer, owner, and rider once an adverse analytical finding comes back for a particular substance. So this is not for your cetirizines or your minor offenses of NSAID overage. These are for what we refer to as a lot of the category 4 substances. And I'll tell you that this year, this competition year, we have not had a positive for a category 4 substance. So it's not as if we see these frequently. But in the proposal, it does enumerate the substances that would be considered severe enough to warrant the 60-day suspension. So just wanted to make sure that you all are aware that that proposal is going through the legislative process, and encourage feedback. We've gotten some feedback already and we appreciate it. So if you'll just keep that feedback coming, we'll make sure that that's all taken into consideration.
Awesome. I don't have any specific questions about that piece at the moment. If we want to move on to the next piece, I think Britt's going to talk to us about minimum eligibility requirements, and do we need those for hunter jumpers, and what everyone thinks about that.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Natalie. So as we've traveled around this year, one of the largest applause lines we've gotten is when we talk about the possibility of having minimum eligibility requirements, especially on the jumper side. And so as a way to be probably proactive for horse and human welfare, both, coming up with a system where people earn the right to compete at a higher level is something that's been very, very popular so far on the road. And so what I've done in the last week is have appointed a task force on the USHJ side that's being chaired by Charlotte Skinner Robson to look into the specifics of what this would look like, starting with the jumpers. And originally when the conversation came up, it was directed towards kind of the upper level, 1.25 and up, but I asked them to look at everything from, kind of the meter forward. And what we're hoping is that as people are developed in this system, that we populate the lower levels as well as the upper levels, and over a period of time, due to the requirement to earn the ability to jump higher, that those people become better at what they do, more people are able to jump higher safely, and we end up as a result having horses that are having longer careers, riders that are having safer careers, and that in general the sport grows and is more sustainable like that. So hopefully over the course of the next couple of months we'll have more information on that, but looking for any kind of feedback from trainers, riders, parents, all stakeholders into what they think that would look like.
Great. As questions come in on that idea, I will get those to you all. In the meantime, we have had a couple of people who followed up about the previous rule change dealing with the category 4 medication positives. And specifically, we've had a couple people ask about barbiturate or pentobarbital metabolites. That was obviously something we were discussing earlier this year when we put the hair testing rule in place, was to be sure that we could look for that if necessary. And obviously that people are thinking about that because that would fall into that category 4 that you mentioned, Sonia. So what can you tell us about what we know about that so far?
Yeah, thanks, Natalie. And I think this is a really good question because there might be some misunderstanding or miscommunication out in the community, but we have not had any positive tests for the euthanasia substance. What we've communicated is that we received reports that it was being used. And so in response to that, we have implemented a couple of strategies. One is the rule that prohibits the possession of certain substances on the grounds of the show, other than by a veterinarian for a proper purpose. And the other one is the hair sample testing. But we have not detected the euthanasia drug in a horse. And so we want to clarify that.
Absolutely. Very important to be clear about that. We have also had somebody ask regarding drugs and medications, and this might be something you could speak to, Sonia. How do we handle the possibility that there are drugs that are not identifiable in our current testing? This person mentions Lance Armstrong as an example of being somebody who passed drug tests for some period of time before being caught. How do we try to identify those substances and get those in our arsenal?
Well, that's a good question. And I think if Dr. Schumacher's still available, I know he has an emergency that he's tending to, but he can maybe talk a little bit about the detection of the substances. And as the technology gets better or the methods become available to detect those substances. But did you hear the question, Dr. Schumacher?
I did. Specifically about Lance Armstrong, he never failed a test that I'm aware of. His was all done with information and an investigation. We are looking at that, trying to do that. And, you know, I know there's been questions about hair testing and soon to be coming to a show near you. We will be doing that in the near future. So as far as the substances, agreed, there are always going to be substances that are difficult to detect or we may not know about them. The whistleblower policy or the whistleblower information from the field is very essential to determining those and to implementing tests. So that's what I would have to say about that.
Great. We do have a couple of questions and comments now coming in regarding the minimum eligibility requirement idea. We have somebody asking, you know, what about the situation of a rider who's previously competed at the highest level successfully, but is now working with younger horses? Would they need to go through the qualification process to move up with those horses?
I think that's one of the questions the task force will be looking into. I mean, I think what we're talking about is, in short, the people who are maybe not qualified to jump a certain height and are buying a horse maybe above their capability to enter those type classes. And it kind of gets back to David's, you know, green light, red light, yellow light. What are you comfortable watching? And so our goal is to make sure that everyone is safe and competent. And I think moving up and down the ladder, that's one of the things that the task force will look for when they make the recommendations.
We also have a question on that topic from someone who wants to know how we would address the financial requirements that this would sort of place on people who don't horse show very often or who have full-time jobs to contend with. How should they navigate a system where they now have to sort of quote unquote earn their ability to move through the heights?
Yeah, that's been brought up before, and I think again, that's one of those things that just has to be examined as we go forward. Like, what is your starting point? What's it based on? The ground floor entry level into the system. Those are all the things that we're going to be dealing with. So I think if people have a comment or a thought about it, this is one of those topics that in our country we haven't ever really addressed at the hunter jumper level. The eventing and some other disciplines have, and so I think that's just where we want to get the idea out there and then kind of move forward slowly to develop a system that's fair to everybody.
Great. We've had quite a range of questions on a variety of different topics come in throughout the webinar. There's been some that have come in just after we've moved on to a different subject area that I haven't been able to get answered. And I know we only have a few minutes left here, but just throwing this out to the general group, we had someone ask, we have task forces and committees for different purposes. Would there ever be a world in which this isn't actually strictly horse welfare related, but would there be a world in which we would potentially have a group that would look at the affordability element of horse showing and horse keeping, since that is something that's on people's minds a lot right now? I'm not sure who would best address that.
I can address that. Actually, we're planning to have a discussion at our annual meeting in January and start the discussion off about where are the costs really coming from? What can we control as an environment and what we can't control? And also the options for accessible options for people to get into the sport, because a couple exist already. And with the regional level competitions changing slightly where the points count for both channels, there's additional opportunity coming for those starting in 27. And actually, I received a call the other day from a trainer that said, everybody loves this. Can we do it in 26? Unfortunately, that rule and the mileage rule attached to those competitions go hand in hand, and there's a time requirement around the implementation of a mileage rule that makes everything have to come into effect beginning with the 27 competition year. But I think there's some level of people might not know what is out there in some of the different breeds and disciplines that is available, but also I think we have to talk about where those costs are coming from and how our rules impact the cost of competing and what need to be the priorities when we look at our rules versus what maybe has just happened over the course of the past 20 or 30 years where rules get added on, and then as costs of things go up, they are additive to some of those costs. So there's a lot to be discussed in that area, and we're excited to get it going at our annual meeting.
We've had a few different questions, usually coming from slightly different situations, but all essentially kind of wanting to know, is there the possibility in the future of doing more drug testing at shows, or testing according to how horses place in competition? So I'm not sure if Stephen or Sonia want to talk, or Bill want to talk about how horses are selected and what the future looks like for the scope of that program.
Yeah, I can address that. Typically we do test the major competitions. We try and address the major classes that are being tested, and a lot of these are a lot of the selections are done randomly or in placings. But we're going to be putting more of an emphasis on strategic testing of specific classes. We actually entered into an agreement with USHJA this year, where they actually were able to help provide some insight as to specific classes at specific competitions, and so we've been welcoming that input. So we do look at more strategic testing here in the future.
Great. And then one question that somebody had earlier on that didn't really fit into any of the categories that we addressed was, Heat index when it comes to both riders and horses. Um, what policies are in place to protect riders and horses on particularly hot days, and whose responsibility is that ultimately?
You want me to take a stab at that?
Sure, go
Well,
for it.
Yeah, we have had a lot of research that we've reviewed, and the like. The AAEP has a statement out there. Specifically, it's not even heat and humidity, but it's also air quality index. We've pushed out some press releases, some publishments of guidelines for competitions. But at the end of the day, my feeling is that it's really up to the individual owner, trainer, the rider of the horse, what's the best interest of that horse's welfare, to whether or not to compete that horse on that day. Some horses may be more impacted by the heat and humidity than others. Some horses with respiratory issues may actually be impacted by the air quality. So it comes down to the fact that everyone needs to make that decision for their own horse based on their specific horse's welfare. We are looking at some additional studies that are being ramped up and try to address this.
Yeah, Natalie, if I can jump in here also, because if anybody wants to kind of go Google it and go, find out, there was a lot of research before the 96 Olympic Games about heat and humidity and the effects on horses. And the thought process of timing of training and shorter durations and use of water, use of these type of things, I think are information that is out there and readily available for anybody. I would encourage you to actually go look up some of that research. You could literally just Google it and go from there. But there's a lot of research on heat humidity that has been out there, and it had a huge effect on how horses are thinking about trained and how they compete in a modern day world.
Great. Well, we're just about out of time, but we did have a couple people pop in at the very end with a question that I know, Bill, you will want to address, which is, even though this is a horse welfare town hall, the price increases that were announced a few weeks ago and how those relate to horse welfare, and whatever, just sort of brief information you can give us about the thought process behind that. I know that's not the main goal of this webinar series, but obviously it's something that's on people's minds, and they deserve some perspective on that. So whatever you can give us is great.
Thanks, Natalie. So to manage the whole process, it takes more resources, right? We've had a tremendous number of reports. We want to keep the investigative process and the turnaround time efficient, which takes more bodies in place, more trained people to operate those, as well in the D&M area and veterinary area. So we'll be adding some key staff members to be able to help with that process. Additionally, we are expanding the amount of research we do. There was actually just an announcement today from the Foundation for the Horse, which is associated with AAEP, that we partnered with in the Chromatic Fund on some research that we're funding for competition horses. There are other research requests that we are reviewing right now, both that came through with the group of requests that the Chromatic Fund money went towards, that weren't funded through that fund, that we are looking at funding separately, as well as some funding for medication administrative studies with a university, and also some other things that we're looking at about research into different types of pressure of equipment in regards to the comfort of the horse and the soundness and health of the horse, et cetera. So we've got a lot going on with that, and we understand that nobody likes a fee increase, and least of all, we like to have to do it, but with the growing need for addressing in a timely manner these reports that are coming in, getting things done, the number of them, and also what we need to be doing around the health and safety and welfare of horses, and making sure we're providing education out to all members, including the education to our officials about their role and responsibilities in this environment. It takes funds to do it. So we have a lot planned and a lot done on the technology side. We're investing in a learning management system that can be used for all levels of members, all types of members, to be able to push out education, not only on the equine safety and welfare, but also judging standards and things like that, so that everybody can have a more informed environment and a better system to be able to understand what's going on in the sport and maybe create a little bit more unity of thought and alignment on where we're going. One addition to that is making sure we have the systems to track information coming in and responses to it, especially through the veterinary team, et cetera. We've had some people question as to or tell us that they have made calls there and have been given erroneous information. And we want to make sure that we have the systems in place to deal with that, so that we can track all the calls in, all the responses given, et cetera, to make sure that we are keeping the integrity of the entire process.
Great. For everybody who asked a question that I wasn't able to get to in the time frame, I will be following up with everyone that with questions that I can answer, or trying to connect you with somebody who can help you. In the meantime, thanks everyone for coming. A recorded version of this will go out to the people who registered but weren't able to attend live. So if you have friends or barn mates that wanted to come to this but weren't able to tune in, they should be getting a link to a recorded version later on. And we also plan on having more in-person and virtual town halls in the future. So hopefully we will see some of you there. And thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Natalie. Thanks for attending today.